you aren't listening all the time in class. You're thinking about some other things. Now, I would call these inner arguments. We're asking the question why, but it's also this kind, we're kind of arguing with ourselves or arguing with what's going on. I wish. It's kind of an inner argument. I wonder if somewhere in that inner argument we're actually arguing with Jesus and not knowing it in that argument. Now you might say, wait, I never argue with Jesus. I mean, he's Lord. Like, I never enter into an argument with him. But sometimes arguments with Jesus can sneak up on you, and you're in the middle of one you didn't even know you were. You didn't know that you were arguing with Jesus. And that's what happens in the text that we have in front of us this morning in Matthew 16. I hope you have your Bibles with you. You should, because you're at Multnomah, right? Matthew 16. Because in this text you find that Peter ends up in an argument with Jesus that snuck up on him, that he wasn't prepared for, and he doesn't even realize he's arguing with Jesus when he is. Now the context, Matthew 16, actually what happens right before this, we'll pick it up in verse 21. What happens right before this is Peter has just won the prize. He's just said, Jesus, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, that's such a great declaration that Peter, you're a rock, and on this rock I'm going to build this church. Incredible high point for Peter's life. And then right after that, in verse 21, from that time Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. He starts arguing with Jesus, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. Now, Peter wasn't thinking about what he was saying. Far be it from you, Lord. I mean, if you call someone Lord, then what they're saying is right. But he's not thinking about this. This will not happen. And then he says, this will never happen to you. Why is he responding in this kind of a way? What you find is that Peter's desire to follow Jesus is running into his instinct for self-preservation. His desire to follow Jesus is running into his instinct for self-preservation. Jesus, you can't die, and if you die, then we're all in big trouble. So none of this can happen, and it sounds like he's speaking even without thinking, because this instinct for self-preservation is actually one of the strongest instincts we have. We want to preserve ourselves, right? Okay, let's just do a little experiment here this morning, and I'm going to give you some instructions, and I want you to follow them carefully, okay? I want you to do what I said, because I'm the chapel speaker, so, right, I can give you some instructions, right, this morning. So follow very carefully my instructions. I want you all to inhale very deeply. Let's do it right here. And hold your breath for 2 minutes. Okay, how are we doing here? Got 15 seconds. Are some of you still doing it? Okay, actually, some of you, how many are still holding? Hold your, okay, a bunch of you are. Okay, you got 15 seconds, 20 seconds. 25 seconds, how are you doing? Some of you are fading off. Okay, I'll let you stop right now. What's interesting is a bunch of you quit before we even began. Some of you are saying, I could do it, really, I could do it if you made me. But at some point, actually, if you didn't make it for 2 minutes, your body would start you breathing again, right? Because you would go unconscious and your body would step into that self-preservation. And some of you didn't even try, because the minute I said 2 minutes, you said, hey, this is not going to work. This instinct for self-preservation actually circumvents your normal thinking. They say there's a part of your brain called the amygdala. I don't know if you've ever heard about that. It's in the back of the brain. They sometimes call it the reptile part of your brain, because that's the part of your brain that's committed to self-preservation. And it holds its own memories and will sometimes do something that's called an amygdala hijack. I don't know if something has ever happened and you just respond without thinking. You know, you don't even think what you're doing and you just respond. Okay, you didn't respond very well. Have you ever had something come at you and you just, that by the way, is a killer pumpkin that's coming at you. You respond, you duck, and you don't even have time to think about it, or a loud noise comes and you jump. It's because you're committed to self-preservation, and this part of your brain will actually take over and respond quicker than your thoughts and save you, which is wonderful if you're falling off a cliff or something like that. But amygdala will also hijack you at times when you maybe are not under threat, but it's a perceived threat, and will cause you to respond maybe like Peter did. No, this cannot be. This can't be. So it's natural for us, if Jesus starts leading us down a path that seems to threaten our instinct for self-preservation, it's very natural for us to resist, because we want to preserve our lives. And so Jesus should be very compassionate towards Peter right now. He should say, Peter, I understand you're a little afraid. Your amygdala took over. You think you're going to die, but let me just encourage you. Everyone goes through this, so just settle down. And look at what Jesus says. He turns to him and says, get behind me, Satan. You're a hindrance to me, for you're not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Jesus calls Peter Satan, after he's just said he's the rock. These are like some of the strongest words that Jesus ever says to Peter. He calls him Satan. He says, I don't even want to listen to you. Get behind me, because what you're saying is not coming from God at all. He doesn't seem to have much compassion for the instinct for self-preservation. And then he says this, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now, the reason why this statement is so important is because of how it begins. It says, if anyone would come after me. So I think that includes us. I think all of you are here because you want to follow Jesus. You probably wouldn't be at Multnomah and taking lots of Bible classes and in chapel today if you didn't want to follow Jesus. So if anyone wants to come after Jesus, that's us. He must let him, and then it says there's three things that he must do. The first is deny himself. Deny himself. Now, what does that mean? Some people think that this means that you can't have any good food. A Christian shouldn't go on vacation. No new clothes. Go around sackcloth and ashes all the time. Actually, I don't think there's anyone here at this school that believes that, but in history, there have been people who believed that the highest spirituality is a form of asceticism, which means I deny anything that I want, and then you're at the top. But that's not what he's talking about here, because actually Jesus didn't live that way. What is he talking about? He says deny self. He's deny self, and what's the greatest desire of self? The greatest desire of self is to preserve self, to save self, to not lose self. So what he's saying is you're going to have to deny self its instinct to preserve self. Follow that? Because that is the deepest, strongest thing that self wants. Self wants to preserve self. You're actually going to have to take over from that amygdala that says anything and everything and to preserve yourself. You know that instinct for self-preservation is actually very, very strong. I had a friend who was a lifesaver, not like the round ones, but he was a lifeguard, not a lifesaver. But he was a lifeguard, and he worked on the coast, and I asked him how that was. He said, we had really interesting training because if someone was drowning, we were supposed to swim out to them, and the first thing we would do is keep a little distance and watch them, but we wouldn't take a hold of them right away. And I said, why wouldn't you do that? And he said, because people who are drowning will actually fight for their lives so hard that they will drown you and them at the same time. So they'll take a hold of you and push you down under the water and climb on top of you to save your lives, and then you'll drown and they'll drown as well. So you just watch them, because in their frantic desire to save their lives, they'll actually kill both of you. And I said, what are you watching them for? And he said that the moment they give up, and then you can help them. Because when they give up, you can turn them over on their backs, which they think, wait, what's that like? And then pull them to shore. He says, so you wait till they give up, because as long as they're fighting to save their life, they're actually going to kill it, take it. And that's the second thing he says. He says the first thing is you need to deny yourself, but the second thing is you need to take up your cross. You actually have to you have to give up somehow. Take up your cross. Now, what does take up your cross mean? Sometimes people think, well, it means go through the Christian life with lots of burdens. Like, make it hard. Just carry those burdens of following Jesus, because it's going to be a burden. But we know Jesus said in another place, he says, come to me, all you are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you what? Rest, right? Because he says his yoke is easy and his burden is light. What is this cross? And why would the Romans make people like Jesus carry their cross? Think about it. He was whipped, and then he had to carry his cross. Why did they do that? They went through the town, and you have this man with a cross on them. Basically, the cross is an announcement to everyone, because you can't actually make someone carry their cross. They could whip him, but he could just lay on the ground and say, I'm not going to carry my cross. Carrying your cross was an announcement that you had accepted your inevitable death. I'm carrying the instrument of my death with me, and so I'm just announcing I have accepted my death, and they wanted everyone to see that this criminal had accepted the fact that they were going to die. He says, if you're going to follow me, you need to be ready at any moment to die. And carry on yourself the announcement that I'm ready to die. Wow. Take up your cross, and then he says, follow me. Follow me. So what he's talking about, he's not talking about losing your life in suicide or losing your life on your own terms or just going, I'm so overworked that I'm going to die, or I can't pay for school and so I'm just going to die. This is actually dying following Jesus. It's not taking my life, it's dying in obedience to him. It's not losing my life because I'm depressed and don't want to live. It's not losing my life because I think my life has no value. It's not losing my life randomly by my own wishes. It's losing my life on the path of obedience to Christ. And he says, if you want to follow me, you're going to have to do three things. You're going to have to deny yourself, its desire to preserve self. You're going to have to take a cross, which is the announcement that I'm ready to die at any moment, and then follow me. Because on the path of follow me, you will have to die. And then he goes on and says this, for whoever would save his life will lose it. What does that mean? Whoever would save his life would lose it. I remember seeing a YouTube video once. YouTube videos are always interesting, right? You can see anything you want on a YouTube video. But I somehow stumbled across this video of a man who went over a very small dam and drowned. And a really small, it was like it's one of those long dams that they sometimes have on rivers, and they go around and the drop is maybe 6 feet. And he'd been boating, and his boat went over this dam, and it dropped down. But those are actually very dangerous dams because of the back spin that they create with the water going over. And his boat capsized, it went down the stream, and he was caught in this waterfall. And every time he tried to come to the surface, the water would push him back down, and then he'd fight his way to the surface and it'd push him back down. And I saw onlookers in other boats trying to get close, but they were afraid that they would get caught in that spin as well. And he fought 15, 20 minutes, and then he gave up and drowned in that waterfall. And just probably less than a minute later, his body popped up about 40 yards downstream. And all of a sudden I realized, well, if he would have let go, he would have been saved. You follow me? And actually, as they say in boating, if you get caught in a waterfall, they say, hold your breath and let go, because the water will actually flush you out. But you're killed by fighting going under. And he basically lost his life fighting to save his life. And Jesus is saying there's something that's similar here. Actually, in the fight for self-preservation, it's in that fight that we actually lose our lives. That we actually will lose our lives fighting to save our lives. And it may be that in this circle that you're fighting about having money or being tired or about your future, that there also is a fight against self-preservation, some aspect of self-preservation. What happens if I don't find a guy? I won't survive. What happens if I'm not able to pay my bills? I'll die. What happens if God would want me to do this? I can't survive. And in that fight for self-preservation, it becomes very difficult to hear the instructions of Jesus and what he wants us to do in that situation. We're fighting to save our lives. We stop asking the question, what does Jesus want? And get hijacked by our natural need for self-preservation. Sometimes this has very practical implications. You won't acknowledge a sin, so you never get free of it. You don't want to make a mistake, so you never learn. You don't want to ask for help, so you stay in your problem. You don't want to work on your side of the relationship, so nothing changes. You don't want to look like a fool, so you never lead. You don't want to fail, so you never risk. And you don't want to die, so you lose your life. And it may be that actually in this area that you're struggling in, that Jesus has answers for you, but they're difficult to hear because of the fears that are associated with that question, because of the instinct for self-preservation that keeps you fighting maybe what Jesus is trying to tell you. Then he goes on and says something else that's very interesting. He says, whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Whoever seeks to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Now, what does he mean by that? See, the crazy thing about Jesus, when he went to Jerusalem and went to that grave, he actually broke through the grave to the other side and went through the resurrection. You know that. But he was the first fruits. He was the first one to be raised because he was raised not back to old life, but forward to new life. And he made the grave a hallway to a new life. So there exists something called resurrection life on the other side of the grave. So whenever Jesus asks you to die, it's always on its way to life, a different kind of life on the other side of death that he wants to give you. That's the crazy thing about following Jesus into death, is that death for him is not a dungeon but a door. It's an opening into something else that he wants. I remember talking to a friend of mine who went to church in Denver, and I said, how are things going at your church these days? And he said, oh man, it's just incredible. It didn't used to be a great church, but it's just amazing now. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, our pastor died. I said, really? He was that bad, huh? So you got a new pastor? No, we still have the same one. He just died. I don't understand. Your pastor died. Yeah, he's still alive, but he actually went through something so difficult, and he really lost everything. Some health problems in his family, some difficulties in his relationship, and somewhere along the way, he just gave up. I said, so he's kind of a broken, wounded man? I said, no, not at all. No, he's fearless. I said, what do you mean he's fearless? He said, do you know how a person who's lost everything has nothing to lose? A person who's died has no fear of death. And he said he has no fear. He's not promoting or defending self. He's not trying to prevent any loss. And then he said something that's really interesting. He said, there's nothing so dangerous as a dead man. Because what do you do to a dead man? What do you do to someone who said, Jesus, whatever you say I'll do, I'm going to do. And by the way, I'm counting on the fact that there will be places on that journey that will feel like death to me, but I believe that they will really run me into life. A dead man or a dead woman is fully free to follow Jesus wherever he leads. Now, let me give you a couple dying tips. I'm going to give you 3 dying tips so that you know how to die. Here's the first dying tip. You can't die without dying. Death feels like death. And there's some spots along the way where you're going to have to die to God's will that will actually, dying hurts. There's a song written by John Fisher who says, you want to have wisdom without making mistakes. You want money without the work that it takes. You want to be loved, but you don't want the heartaches. Everyone wants to get to heaven, Lord. Nobody wants to die. Everyone wants to get to heaven, Lord. No one wants to die. You want to be forgiven without taking the blame. You want to eat forbidden fruit without leaving a stain. You want the glory, but you don't want the shame. Everyone wants to get to heaven, Lord. No one wants to die. Actually, death feels like death. It's not very easy. So that's the first tip. You can't die without dying. The second one is get it over quickly. Because the longer you fight, if God's trying to take you through the grave into new life and you're fighting on this side, guess where you're going to be? You're going to be half dead for a long time. And that's the worst place to be, to where God's fighting to get a hold of you and you're going, I'm gonna die. And then you stay in this half dead. Just get it over with. Surrender, submit, surrender to Him about your future, surrender to Him about your money, surrender to Him about your body, surrender to Him about your time. Say, Jesus, whatever you say, I'm going to go there. I'm on, get it over with. Because the way to live is to die, is to surrender to the will of Christ. And then the third one, don't underestimate how much you'll lose if you don't die. I know people who have fought dying in a certain area for years and years and years, and they have lost so much because they wouldn't give up. Because they wouldn't open their hands, they wouldn't give, they wouldn't surrender to the will of God. And you look at it from the outside and you go, you're losing so much as they try to hold on to the thing that they don't want to lose. Don't underestimate what you can. I know people who've, we don't have time for stories. But don't underestimate what you're going to lose if you die. And so this actually is the key lesson that could be the most important lesson you learn your whole time at Multnomah, and that's this. If you really want to live, you're going to have to die. If you really want to live, you're going to have to die. There is no way to true, abundant, amazing, exciting, mind-blowing life except through death. And it will be a struggle and a fight for you. And then the second corollary to that is if you're not willing to die, you're actually going to lose your life. So if you can learn this lesson, God will blow your mind as He leads you into ever more abundant life. And it's life that won't depend on your circumstances and on your talents. It will because Jesus is leading you that direction, you will find life. If you can't learn this lesson, all of your Multnomah education will not change the outcome that Jesus warns. You will lose your life if you don't lose it willingly for Christ. I want you to just close your eyes right now and think about that area that you're struggling in right now, because I'm sure there is one. In your mind, you're probably arguing with yourself or you're arguing with others, but could it be that unknowingly you're actually arguing with Jesus? That He has answers for you? But your instinct to self-preservation is causing you to push Him under. It's causing you to argue with Him. It's causing you to say, no, that direction we can't go because I will not survive. What would happen if you just got it over quickly in that area? If you just said, I surrender. I will follow you, Jesus, wherever you lead, and I'm counting on the fact that that will mean death. But I know that death in following you will lead me to life. Can you follow Him on that path through the grave and out the other side, even right now today? Jesus, this spiritual lesson is a hard one, and it takes a long time to learn. I'm still learning it. I think I will learn it our entire lives, but we do want a life that is just amazing, abundant, full, an adventure with you that is beyond description. We know that we won't find that if we don't follow you on the path of surrender. Thank you that you broke the power of sin and death. You opened the other end of the grave. And because of that, we can follow you into resurrection life. In Jesus' name, amen.